Woo. Trying to find my way, 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 trying to find my way. I'm trying, change me.
My faith is in God alone, beyond a reasonable doubt. This brainstorm, pouring rain on your season of drought. Just trying to lay a couple seeds in the mouth. Thanks for listening. You ever get the feeling you was missing?
What up, y'all? It's your hometown hero, Scott Lane, the Black Bruce Wayne, a.k.a. the real Adam Coleman. So, you riding with Tru-ID. So I'm always looking for ways to broaden the show and address issues that just aren't being talked about elsewhere. For anybody who's been following along with this, you know that I focus a lot on apologetics, particularly in the urban or black community context. And in a recent episode, I talked about what I believe to be the biggest mistake that the apologetics community has made when engaging the black community. And I want to expand on that a little bit. You can go check out that show. I think it's in the It's Time for Answers episode, so you can check that out. But, we kind of want to expand on that idea. I'm not going to go into depth right now. We'll probably get into it during the show. But, in order for the gospel to really confront the challenges to Christianity that are on the rise in the black community, we have to have people who hold the Christian worldview speaking to the issues that concern the black community today. If you're not able to really speak to what's going on today in the black community, then it's going to be difficult for you to have a hearing, for people to take you seriously, to really even hear the gospel. Now, that may sound counterintuitive to some of my preacher folks out there, but the reality is it's true. You've got to show how the Christian worldview relates to the everyday lives of people that we're speaking to when you're dealing with apologetics in the urban community. And I think that because we haven't done that, we've kind of missed a link in the chain, and it's been somewhat of an uphill battle, I guess, in recent years as we see the conscious community, gaining steam, a little bit. So, with that said, what we want to do on this show is just from time to time, either myself or bringing different thinkers on that I come across, just have people who can reason through some of these sorts of things and demonstrate that Christianity isn't about just a bunch of uninformed Bible thumpers who, as my mom would say, are so heavenly minded that they're of no earthly good. So with that said, it's about to get real. From BEC Media, we got my man Big L. How you doing there, brother?
Man, I'm good, man. I'm too blessed to be stressed, brother, like the old folks would say.
There we go. I heard that, bro. I heard that. Well, I tell you what, man. It's been a while since we did that episode a while back when I came on your show, man. So I'm glad we was finally able to hook it up, get you on here, Tru-ID, to share your thoughts, bro. Yeah, I check out your show, man. And one thing, I'll have you kind of introduce yourself and talk about, BC Media and what y'all are about. But one thing I appreciate about what you guys do is, if I could sum up the strength of your show, it would be the word relevance. I feel like you guys are always talking about things that are relevant to the community today, and you're bringing the Christian aspect to that. So that's one thing I really appreciate about what y'all do. But for my listeners out there, man, just introduce yourself. Tell everybody who you are, what you're about.
Oh man, well my government name is Elgin, but I go by Big L, and I am the host and program director at BEC Media. Well, our mission statement essentially is we're looking to change the ideological landscape of the black church and equip black Christians to have a better black tomorrow. Now, I know for some folks, the fact that I put black in there like that makes them a little uncomfortable, and that can be a red flag for them. Mm-hmm. But let me be clear, the one thing that we do not teach and advocate is any form of hatred or bias or any of those type of things. We just believe that there has been a hole in Christianity, in westernized culture, that has left out black folks, black preachers, black thought, black perspectives, and we're looking to fill that gap. So that's essentially what we do, man. We got a bunch of shows, got some good stuff, doing some good stuff, man. And I'm excited to be back here chopping it up with you, man, with another lovely discussion.
Definitely, bro. Appreciate that. So I'm gonna put you on the hot seat with a question already. I apologize for going off
Yeah.
script, but I got to do it because you said something that made me think about it. I was listening to one of your videos the other day, and you made a great point about how we have African Americans, and I'm gonna just put it out there, man. I believe in just straight talk. Okay, so when it comes down to racially mixed churches, all right, I hold the perspective, and I think you just stated it as well, that we should, as believers, there ought to be that fellowship as it describes in the Word. We ought to be one body, so on and so forth. However, there are social conditions and things out here in the culture that once we step outside the doors of that church are confronting some groups, i.e. black people, that may not be confronting other groups, i.e. white people. Now that can be a very divisive idea. It can be a very uncomfortable idea. Now, that being said, every culture faces particular pressures, you know what I'm saying, particular challenges. I'm sure, I don't want to make it seem like all white people have it great and black people just are scrambling all over the place and that's just the end of the story. My point is that every people group, you're talking about just in this natural world, faces different types of concerns, different types of challenges, when it comes to the culture and broader society. And what we don't want to see, for the sake of the fellowship of the brethren, it shouldn't be the case where the things that we confront outside the church are so swept under the rug that it disrupts the fellowship or causes the fellowship within the church to be inauthentic. Does that fairly state kind of where you were coming from in that video?
Yeah, it's a fair statement, and I think one of the more controversial things that I've stated to some, when I say controversial, is for some people, was that I don't believe that black Christians should force themselves to be in fellowship with white Christians. And I use that phrase and those terms, forced, intentionally. And I agree that every people group has their own particular issues. But I think we agree that black people have a special type of issue. And unfortunately, that issue has not been properly addressed in the whole culture of Christianity, Westernized Christianity. Specifically, there's a push for reconciliation. Now, I'm not against reconciliation. I think reconciliation is a beautiful thing. But it's oftentimes that we got pushed, black Christians get pushed to be reconciled without having those who have offended, oppressed, turned a blind eye to our Christian recognize or do what is needed to bring reconciliation. That the onus of the responsibility of reconciliation is oftentimes placed on black Christians' shoulders. And I think that's unfair, and I don't think that is Christ-like. So that's the reason why I have made those type of statements. I believe we should fellowship. I believe that we are one body. All of us, white, black, blue, Skittle, Christian, that we should be fellowship and worshiping together. But when we try to force that in there with this thought process of, I just got to go through, I got to overlook the fact that right outside my community is getting gentrified, and a host of other issues that are specific and exclusive to black folks, that I'm forced to ignore those things for the sake of fellowship and worship. I don't think that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Right. So now let me kind of make kind of contextualize it a little bit. One of my policies in my marriage, right? And sometimes this gets me in trouble, but one of my policies is, there are times when, me and my wife have a disagreement about something, and maybe I don't really feel I was all that wrong, but I might just apologize anyway for the sake of peace. You know what I'm saying? That's just what it is. But I try not to do that very often, because if I'm taking an L, so to speak, and I'm not doing it in truth, then I'm really not reconciling. I'm really just sweeping things under the rug. You see what I'm saying? And so I generally don't do that. My wife will tell you, it's like, if I feel like I'm wrong, hey, I'm going to take that L. You know what I'm saying? But if I'm not, then I'm sorry, I got to stand on truth, and on the basis of truth, we can really reconcile, And so, getting to, so to your point, I think that people often confuse reconciliation with just, like you said, turning a blind eye to things. Turning a blind eye to things is not reconciliation, right? And you cannot come together, because see, the Bible calls us to come together, right? Obviously, but we can't do it disingenuously, or else that's not true fellowship. And so, therefore, we have to hash out, some of these issues that do seem to, that do divide us, in order for the fellowship to be real. And that's a two-way street. That's not a one-way type of a deal. It's not like, okay, one group has to go 80% of the way and the other 20. It's both ways. And I think that entails difficult conversations, uncomfortable conversations, and so on. But they're necessary conversations if we are to, like you said, I think you put it well, have a Christ-like form of reconciliation.
And I agree. And I think that when it comes to racial reconciliation, I don't think all of the onus of the responsibility to be reconciled is always on one party.
Sure.
But I do feel like the party who is, I'm trying to use the word, who is the offender, is usually the one who is going to carry the bulk of the responsibility of leading the conversation, or at least initiating the conversation, or being receptive to the conversation. Because in this illustration that you use of you and your wife, you're not blocked off to reconciliation with her in those situations. You're ready to receive it. It just has to be in its proper format. And you don't want to be the one who's the scapegoat all the time. But you, in those conversations, you acknowledge wrongdoings that you could have done. A misperception, a misunderstanding of something that she was stating. Mm-hmm. Those are the type of honest, open dialogues that we as the body of Christ need to be having, and more importantly, facilitating.
Nice. I respect that, man. So those are tough conversations to have, but they need to be had. Mm-hmm. So anyway, man, I went a little ways there already, but let's talk a little bit about BEC Media and what you guys do. And kind of just, what you've got out there for the people so far.
Well, so far what we do and what we have done is I usually handle the bulk of the social justice, the social injustices. I do a lot of that. My partner, A.O. Green, he likes to call me Harry Allen, the media assassin. If you remember anything about Public Enemy, he was that guy who dealt with the social side. I deal a lot with the social side of BBC, so I talk a lot about things that take place within the Black collective that are difficult, but not only from a standpoint of what white supremacy is doing for us, but also areas of concern where we need to be taking responsibility and accountability also. Mm-hmm. So it's a very delicate balance. But also we got, a show that deals with homesteading, who is teaching people how to live a more healthier lifestyle. We have a broadcast that deals with mental health issues. But our big one that we're really formulating and working on behind the scenes is our urban apologetics one. Mm-hmm. And I know that's something that you deal with a lot. So, but we know, you and I, and some of the listeners know that is a topic that needs a tremendous amount of focus and attention right now.
Sure.
Not just from the Hebrew Israelite community, which we'll talk more about later on the broadcast, but just in general, particularly with people who just have a false understanding of who Christ is. Something as simple and as dangerous as that, into something as broad as cults and fellowships such as the Hebrew Israelites. So we're doing a lot of work, man. We're moving into a more ministry-minded field. One of the things that I'm working on personally is taking more of a ministry focus to social justice, not just highlighting social injustices, but giving people the avenues and the scriptures and the principles from our faith to fight injustice. So that's really, and putting boots on the ground, man. starting doing little B, C study groups in different areas to actually get people to be comfortable with walking in their faith and accepting their blackness.
Wow, that's good. That's good stuff. That's good stuff. Because as you know, being a Christian, some would have us believe that's an oxymoron right there, but we know that's untrue. But yeah, it's so crucial, man. And we're going to shift gears here in a second. But something you said about social justice. I think what you just said is so misunderstood oftentimes. Particularly, and I kind of said it at the beginning of the show, but honestly, man, if you really listen to these conscious community dudes, you really just can't get a hearing with these guys unless you're able to engage these social issues. If you can't speak to what's going on in the community, then whatever you have to say about spirituality is considered to be it's just irrelevant. It's just irrelevant. You have to have some type of perspective, some type of worldview guidance as to what's going on right now in order for people to see, the I don't even want to use the term benefits, but just the where the rubber meets the road between what you're claiming about spirituality and where they're at. So, that's good stuff, bro. So, switch gears a little bit. We talked about just some of the different cults and things like that are cropping up in the black community, the apologetics aspect. And hip-hop has been a vehicle to that, So I kind of want to just get your thoughts on the music. Of course, we had Kendrick Lamar here release his album, the Damn album last week, where he's got some undertones there, in regards to the Hebrew Israelites. But before then, we kind of want to talk about just give your thoughts a little bit about spirituality, hip hop, and kind of how hip hop has been a vehicle for some of these things.
Well, the one thing that I know, man, is for years, and unfortunately, some of the stuff I didn't realize until after I came to the faith and matured in the faith, was how dominant an artist's spirituality or views of their religion showed up in their hip-hop lyrics or their R&B lyrics. Mm-hmm. For one, Earth, Wind & Fire. Earth, Wind & Fire, much of their music, which I absolutely love and think is fantastic, has a heavy spiritual undertone. They have, it's very much, they were very much into an Egyptology, type of spirituality that shows up a lot on their album covers and certain songs. And it wasn't something I learned until years after I've come to the faith. But I remember listening to Poor Righteous Teachers. Mm-hmm. Poor Righteous Teachers, their influences is Five Percenters, Wu-Tang Clan. I can run down a list. FDR County.
Yeah. Yep.
There's so many, and there's so many artists. Now there's always been this sacred secular, argument for years that probably going to go on until Jesus comes back. But I was really taken aback and surprised of the outrage that so many Christians had towards the Kendrick Lamar album. Mm-hmm. And I have a theory and thought process on why they were so taken aback.
Okay.
If he's put out, this is his fourth album. Good Child, Mad City, mm-hmm. and To Pimp a Butterfly, which is his more celebrated albums. But on To Pimp a Butterfly, he had a lot of songs where there were hints of him being a believer. Mm-hmm. There were certain things and certain words he would say, certain catchphrases, certain things. And I remember after the album came out, there was tons of discussion and debates amongst Christians on whether Kendrick Lamar was a Christian or not.
Yeah.
Now, he never once came out and said that he was or he wasn't. It wasn't something that he engaged in, mm-hmm. but it was something that Christians began to do. And a lot of Christians welcomed Kendrick Lamar into the faith without seeing any fruit mm-hmm. or hearing any profession. Mm-hmm. Okay? But I think a lot of the frustration that Christians have now, based off of his new album, is the fact that in some ways their feelings are hurt because they accepted him into the faith, and now they kind of look bad because he's showing that he's really not a Christian.
Okay.
But it's this thing too. Now remember, this is Pink the Butterfly is coming out in the same time period where Lecrae is making his ascension and taking his walk into quote unquote the world to share the gospel message in the manner in which he believed God told him to do. Now remember how much blowback that he gets still today from Christians based off of, him not doing as much theology, scripture heavy, rap as he did, Jesus music, and some of the early, the Rebel album.
Right.
Right. Now he's doing music with known secular artists. His new song "Blessings." He has the one cat, Ty Dolla
Sign, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's this amazing phenomenon that is taking place with music and the way believers are approaching it. And I think it has a lot to do with it. We're just hungry for truth. And some of us are just accepting, or not accepting, we're wrestling with different people over different bits of truth. I don't see anything particularly new about what Kendrick has done, but I do see what he's done as problematic to the body.
Okay.
That can't be denied.
Interesting, man. And I think you're right, bro, because and I hadn't heard anybody break it down that way. So this is very interesting. I hadn't really thought about it. But you're right. I mean, there's always been, spiritual undertones in hip hop since, like the beginning. I mean, when I was a kid, dog, I would fall asleep listening to Wu-Tang. You know what I'm saying? And I could quote all the lyrics. And I mean, for the life of me, I had no clue what them cats was talking about. I mean, I could spit it word for word, but I didn't know all the 5%er lingo and all that kind of stuff. And it's funny because now I could, hear some of those old joints. Like I heard Triumph the other day. And there's one line where Ghostface Killer says something like Black Noble Drew Ali, something. And I didn't know who Noble Drew Ali. I just thought it was a hot line. You know what I'm saying? I just thought I didn't know who that cat was. But now I was like, oh snap. It was he was talking about, some more scientist type stuff, So, these spiritual undertones have been there, but I think you're really on to something, man. Like, with Kendrick Lamar, you're right. I mean, there was like this sense that he was in the fold, among believers. People had like you said, had welcomed him in. And I guess now it's like this sense of betrayal, like, oh snap, like you let us down, right? Like you kind of we thought you were with us, but now you're not. And it is, you're right. I think there is kind of like this hurt feelings type of thing amongst believers that maybe has added to this kind of.
But think about this too. When September Butterfly came out, that was really like in the height of all these police shootings. It was, just like every other week was police shooting. And then he had that one performance. I'm not sure if it was on the Grammys or the American Music Award where he did the one song that kind of gave homage to Africa, and now you got a black celebrity on a predominantly white stage taking a stand, for black people. So it's like now, I think a lot of black Christians in general are finding it really difficult to support Kendrick. It's like, man, I can't even support Kendrick now because Kendrick has made such bold statements with his music. And I think in those situations, we as Christians really don't know how to deal with those type of issues because I don't think there's a whole lot of, us feeling bad when we listen to it. I think there's more on the lines of I'm worried about what other people are going to say about me, knowing that I listen to Kendrick Lamar now.
So let me ask you this then. So, because we're kind of dealing with a similar thing with Chance the Rapper.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? On his new album, of course, he has the song Blessings. Of course, he has a song with like
Kanye
in the joint, Jay Electronica, Kanye. Yeah, they're all, they're kind of. But again, there's these Christian, lingo, these Christian overtones. I guess my question to you is, how can we not? What do we need to do to not make the same mistake with Chance the Rapper that we made with Kendrick Lamar? And hopefully, I hope Chance is saved. I really do. I don't know him personally, but I hope he is for his sake, right? But how could we have better approached this Kendrick Lamar situation so that we wouldn't have this feeling of being jilted and
I think
left out there?
I think it's hard, man. For one, I just think that we as believers have to move away from uh, feeling, emphasis on feeling like someone is a believer based off of a cliche or something along those lines. I think we need to go back to Scripture and see what Scripture says about what one of the brethren looks like. One of the brethren doesn't look like a sinless person. We're not expecting them to be perfect at all. We're expecting to see some fruits. We're expecting to see him model some sort of Christ-like behavior. And I think that's where it gets really fuzzy with us as believers, because our theology is not always as clear cut as that. Some of our theology is still as fuzzy as that for years, man. Just for instance, I don't know how many Christians believe that DMX is a Christian, because on every doggone album, DMX has a prayer at the end praying.
Right.
Well, that prayer in and of itself does not mean one is a believer. That's not a qualification or a sign of belief. You know what I mean? And I think those are the type of conversations that we have to have. Now, that doesn't mean that we begin to judge these people. That just means that we say, okay, man, that was a nice song that Chance made. That has some stuff, and okay, that might help me, think about some things, but that doesn't qualify Chance as a Christian. And I don't think there's anything wrong with us as believers asking people, are you a Christian? Are you a believer? To get them and not allowing them to give some wishy-washy, half-hearted, well, I'm spiritual. Well, okay, you say that you're spiritual is the equivalent of saying no to the question of, are you a Christian or not? And being okay with that.
That's
you know
good.
what I'm saying? And that's the thing. I think that I don't have a heaven or hell to put anyone. My responsibility is to love my neighbors, love folks, evangelize, share the gospel, and live and model the gospel. So maybe if we were so less worried about judging and worried more about modeling, and I think, and invite them into Christian spaces. That doesn't mean that their views or their whatever is going to wear off on us, and all of a sudden now we're going to become like Kendrick.
Right, man. That's good. And when you say invite people into Christian spaces, that don't mean that you gotta, start speaking at churches.
No, and that's not exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like I know when T.I., you know what I'm saying, he went through his situation with the gun situation where he got locked up or something like that. He had his probation he had to deal with, or community service rather. And so part of that was going around speaking at different churches. And cats, man, you couldn't tell cats that T.I. wasn't a Christian. You know what I'm saying? Now I don't know if he is or not. I mean, I'm not gonna speak on that, but I don't know what he professes to be. But just because we want to bring people into the community if they are truly seeking Christ and so on and so forth. But that doesn't mean you got to be speaking at churches, performing at churches, having a microphone. Just come and fellowship. Come and fellowship. You know what I'm saying?
And I think for us, and in particular within the Black community, the idea of heaven and hell have always been more important than our actual walk with Christ. And I think it has a lot to do with the complexities and the issues that we face in our collective as a whole. But it's always been more important, that pie in the sky, I hate to use that phrase, but essentially that's what it is. That has always been more important than the sanctification process. Meaning, where I'm going and how I get from point A to point B, this notion that if I become a believer on Monday, that all of a sudden I begin to stop going to behaviors and to have the thought process that I had before Monday. That's not the way it works. And we have to be able to provide people an environment to grow, a safe place for them to grow and to develop. And that means I can disciple some people who still have some behaviors that don't look quite like what I, as a believer, would desire them to be.
Right. That's good. That's the key word is discipleship there. You see what I'm saying? Because, let's just look in the Western context. I mean, obviously, the idea that there is a hope beyond this realm, beyond this life, certainly has strengthened and played a major role at just being able to survive, for Black people to survive in this Western context over the last couple centuries, right? But with that, that's not the end all be all of the Christian worldview, right? I mean, and if you leave out the part about sanctification, if you leave out the part about discipleship, then you have an unbalanced Christian perspective. You end up with this Christian perspective that is all about the hereafter, and you miss out on all the things that are within the Word that deal with the here and now, that deal with today. You become kind of a top-heavy sort of Christian, and that's just not the way that God has designed us to be, But fascinating, man. So I want to shift gears here a little bit, because and this is actually what kind of brought about me inviting you on the show to talk about this Kendrick Lamar album. I was listening to the album, and I checked out the song "Fear," which a lot of people are talking about. Definitely has a lot of heavy Hebrew Israelite themes in there, and just to kind of throw that at you, I was talking with Vocab Malone the other day on a Google Hangout we did, and kind of my observation was that if you know anything about the Hebrew Israelites, and maybe I'll have you kind of get into that a little bit, but if you know anything about them, one of the things they believe is that obviously Black people are cursed, due to our ancestors not having followed the law, and one of those curses they believe is kind of like this idea that we will be distressed, like perpetually distressed, having what they call, astonishment of heart, I think is what it says in the King James. And kind of what I'm thinking is that with this song Fear, Kendrick Lamar has taken that aspect of their beliefs and just kind of fleshed it out over the course of a song. So you hear him starting out talking about in the first verse, where he's kind of like the voice of a mother, scolding their child. I'll beat you, for this. I'll beat you for that. And the song ends, that verse ends out, you're not going to fear. If you don't fear anybody else, you're going to fear me. And then he moves into kind of a teenage mode where he's talking about I'll probably die of this, I'll probably die of that, and then he goes into even him being a successful rapper, like having all this money but still having these anxieties. So he kind of fleshes out this idea of, we're under the curse, you know what I mean? So no matter what you do in different phases of life, even if you become successful, you're still going to have this, what Hebrew Israelites believe to be this distress and anxiety and whatever that we're kind of cursed with. So I was thinking about these things. And I was thinking about that first verse about, the mom saying, I'm going to beat you for this and beat you for that. And I recall seeing you had posted on Facebook, you had posted about a book that you were reading that kind of deal with like, whoopings and stuff like that, and how that's not the answer for the Black community. Now, my mom and dad would staunchly disagree with you. That verse about spare the rod and spoil the child was like the foundational scripture of our household. So they would disagree with you, but I was very intrigued by your perspective on that. And this is an area that I'm trying to gain more perspective on. So I definitely wanted to have you on to just kind of just talk about that and just kind of give your thoughts on where you were going there.
Oh man, for some time now, I've been trying to. Just a little bit of background. I have probably about almost 20 years worth of experience working with the youth, whether it's juvenile detention centers. I was a juvenile drill instructor. I worked in a homeless shelter for juveniles for some time. I worked in a teaching assistant. So that's pretty much my background. So I've always been fascinated by the idea of corporal punishment being used as a way of correcting someone's behavior. Now, of course, growing up in our community, spankings and whoopings and things along those lines have always been used as a form of behavior modification, for lack of a better phrase. And I just have always had an issue with it. I mean, and I didn't get spanked much as a child. Now, there were times where I felt like I deserved spanking because I had that thought process. Just quick story. I'm coming home from school one day. I must have been in the 5th grade. Lived in Philly, coming home from school one day, and I saw 2 girls beating up my sister. So, of course, I went down the street, Then I jump in the air, do the Bruce Lee kick. I kick one of the girls, I'm pulling them off, I'm hitting them. My dad comes out of the house, snatches me up, and whips me from the street to inside the house. And the whole time he's telling me, what he's saying is, I told you never to hit a woman. Now he's using hitting me as a way of getting me to not hit a woman. And the hypocrisy of it was just something that was mind-blowing. So I wanted to kind of figure out, man, I've always kind of researched particular hot-button topics. And I know this one, disciplining children and child rearing in the Black community is something that we don't talk about unless it's amongst family. Because, it's always, don't tell me how to raise my kids. It's that mentality that I think we have been conditioned with through a number of factors. So I wanted to understand a little bit better why. So I picked up this book by her name is Dr. Stacey Patton. It's called Spare the Kids, Why Whooping Children Won't Save Black America. And she kind of goes into talking about how most of the time that we have whooped our children have not been because of the child's behavior, it's been because of how we felt at the moment, and because we were hoping that by whooping that child, it prevented a future worse behavior. And I found it absolutely fascinating. And I just, in my own personal life, I have a 20-year-old daughter, and now I have a 2-year-old, and I'm going to have a new child, a new baby girl. Now, I remember whooping my 20-year-old when she was younger. And my thought process, honestly, was I'm going to whoop her now, that way when she gets to be 8, 9, 10, I won't have to worry about it, because she already understands that dad don't play around.
Right.
And that was the thought process. And I'm looking now and thinking that I'm not anti-corporal punishment, even knowing what I know now. I just don't believe it's for me. And a lot of the concepts that have been put with it is false, and it's dangerous, and it's harmful to our children. So I speak about it often, and I address it in many different ways, but I try to address it in such a way where I'm not offending people, because I know how sensitive and delicate they are. Now, when I heard the Kendrick Lamar album, and I heard Fear, that immediately, several things picked up and popped into my mind. First thing is the fact of how his mother was the one who was disciplining him. He comes from a 2-parent home, and in this situation, it's actually his mother who is disciplining him. And she's disciplining him not because he has done something. She specifically says, I'm doing this to keep you from doing this. I'm doing this to keep you from doing that. I'm doing this because it's preventive. He hasn't even done it yet.
Right.
And she's doing it to instill fear in him. And it's mind-blowing how we have been taught to want to have our children fear us. And I just don't think that's a very healthy perspective to have.
Now, that's interesting, because I'm not going to say who it was, but I'm just see how I can phrase it. I know of a person who them and their siblings were going to Disney World, right? And I think it was like 4 or 5 of them. And actually, their mom gave them a beating before going to Disney World, just so that they wouldn't act up at Disney World. It was she gave him a preliminary preventative beating. And I was like, yeah, that's a bit extreme. It was like, I don't know about all that, but I didn't really give it a lot of deep thought. But later on, I was like, you know what is that about though? You know what I'm saying? Like, how did we arrive at the idea that was the means of, quote unquote, keeping kids in line, and I think I agree with you. I think there are some problems. And then let me throw this idea at you, because as I was preparing for this interview, several things kind of flowed through my mind, and I'm thinking about Kendrick Lamar, and I don't really know a lot about his upbringing, but I understand he grew up in Compton and things like that. Now, trauma, right? The idea of trauma. And I think there's been some studies done about this. I don't want to overstate my case here, but I'm like you. Actually, I do have a background in dealing with youth. I also worked at a homeless shelter for kids and runaways. I've done some stuff in the criminal justice aspect of as well, working in prisons. And so when you have kids growing up in an area that is essentially a war zone,
Mm-hmm.
right? Think about Chicago. You know, if you're walking to school every day and you actually might get shot, right? You actually will be crossing paths with people who have lost loved ones to gang violence, and various forms of just violence. Period. Maybe even domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're living in these type of areas, right? Within that context, it seems to me that whooping your kid probably isn't the best idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when they're dealing with all these forms of trauma in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what are your thoughts on that? Because it just seems to me, and obviously I'm not trying to say all black people don't live in the hood. I mean, so this doesn't apply to everybody.
Sure.
But if we're not thoughtful about these sorts of things, and we just kind of fly on autopilot,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not aware of some of these contextual issues, then it seems to me that we're just kind of just going with the flow, doing what our parents did, and actually we could be doing more harm than good. What do you think about that?
I think in many instances, man, you know, trauma is probably the number one killer within the black collectives. I think from trauma springs so many other things. From trauma springs emotional eating, sexual promiscuity, stress, our desire and want, and our susceptibility to false theology and false ideology. All stem from trauma. Unhealthy, unrealistic expectations, unhealthy worldview. All of those spring from trauma. And when you have an area such as Chicago, or unfortunately, most predominantly black, low socioeconomic environments, there's a ton of different types of trauma that not only take place outside in the streets, but take place within the family dynamic. Take place when we have domestic violence that is not properly addressed. When we have sexual abuse within our homes that is not addressed. All that, when we have music, and we have television, we have video games that are full of trauma-inducing type of situations. When you have a hip-hop culture where slipping something into a woman's drink and then having sex with her is an okay thing. When your number one television show is a zombie apocalypse that spends less time focusing on the zombie apocalypse and more time on the depravity of man, it's just like there is a major trauma issue. And the number one people who receive and are unsure and are unable even to address and to properly deal with trauma is our youth. So it makes sense when you see them in these types of situations. And the one thing that I try not to fall into the trap, not the trap, but I hear a lot of people say that, you know, we are desensitizing our children to things. And my question has always been, when were they sensitized? When did you create a safe environment for your child not to listen to certain music, not to watch certain things on TV? Do you live in an environment? Can you afford to live in a community that is not only trauma-free, but deals with trauma appropriately? Have you taught your kids how to deal with trauma properly? And those are major, major issues when it comes to the body of Christ, even. Because unfortunately, many of our churches are not equipped from a professional standpoint on how to deal with trauma.
Right. Well, let me go, man, that's good. Let me go there right quick, bro, because I think you're hitting on something that's so important. And this is why I wanted to have you on the show, man, because I knew you was going to bring a dope perspective and really broaden out the conversation. So when it comes to dealing with trauma, you know, the church dealing with trauma, you know, come on, you know how it is, bro. You worked in the mental health field. You work with you know, black folk don't like to deal with mental health, man. We don't.
True.
You know, if you bring up mental health, the first thing we say, I ain't crazy. That's the first thing that people are going to respond with. There's this aversion to mental health types of services and interventions in the black community. And honestly, I haven't personally done a study on it. I don't know where that comes from, you know, but I have seen it, you know. And I agree with you that as the church body, we need to have the resources.
Yes.
For whatever community that we're servicing. And some of those would be professional mental health services. We have to give people access, you know, to these sorts of things, or else, you know, this trauma and all these other things they're dealing with will just continue to fester. And I feel like that's what you have going on in the inner city, and it's not being addressed whatsoever. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's not being addressed, man, because unfortunately, when I went to seminary Bible school for a couple of years, I didn't graduate, but I spent enough time there to know that dealing a holistic view of man is not something that is taught. Having a firm grasp on your hermeneutics and being able to exegete scripture and all those things are the focus, but not dealing with the holistic aspect, not dealing with man's body in the physical is not something that is taught to pastors, bishops, apostles, whatever they're called today. They changed the titles so much, bro.
Right.
You know,
I think apostles is the popular one now. I think you was bishops for a while, and you had evangelists for a while. Yeah.
So, you know, it's one of those things where it's not taught, man. And even introducing a holistic perspective to a church for many people is problematic. Because for one, they're automatic we've been conditioned to feel as though that if it doesn't have an explicit direct scripture to line up with a particular thing, I must avoid it at all costs. And that's an incredibly, and I know that seems kind of extreme and almost exaggeratory, but on many levels, that's exactly what it is. Well, I just have Jesus, and Jesus is enough. And that's like, hold on, time out. So you're just going to try to pray this trauma away.
Yeah, when there's so many resources, it should be more resources within the body to, I guess, take more of a multifaceted approach. Because, you know, I mean, even within, I'll just say my personal circle, there are people who were very resistant to mental health services for a period of time. And when they finally, because they just believed that it was some sort of anti-Christian sort of thing to tap into. And then when they finally did sit down with somebody, it was just kind of like a relief. It's like, oh man, this isn't the, you know, what I thought it was going to be, you know, but again, you're right. I mean, there's still this idea that it's a non-Christian thing to do to seek certain types of counseling and so forth.
Sure.
You know, I think that's very unfortunate.
And I'm not attempting to turn this into a, you know, once saved, always saved type of discussion, because that's multifaceted and there's so many different ways we can go with that. But I want to make this statement. For whatever reason, Christians feel and believe that they can lose their salvation just by being in the presence of people who do not have a relationship with Christ. So we tend to avoid places where we can essentially be a light or receive light. We don't believe that God can use other things to bring blessings to us if it doesn't have the Christian stamp of approval on it. And I just think that we have to, and I think that has a lot to do with a very immature faith and a flawed, faulty foundation of how the faith works.
Now, see, I'm going to throw this at you too. So again, with the Kendrick album, obviously there's a lot of Hebrew Israelite themes in there, and kind of gleaning from what you're saying, if the church is shutting its doors from, you know, resources and things that people need on a practical level, then would you say that it then opens a door for people to go seeking answers elsewhere? And then maybe that contributes to, you know, what we're seeing from the Hebrew Israelite community, people looking to them or looking to the Comedics or whomever else. Like, what do you think about that?
I think when Christians or people in general leave the church and they go end up in other types of organizations, the bulk of the responsibility has to fall upon the body. If we have Jesus, who is all that we need and all the cliches and adjectives and metaphors that we want to apply, then something that we've done has to have happened or not happened to keep them where they are. And when we don't address, now let's deal with the Hebrew Israelite aspect just for a moment. In my community, the Black Hebrew Israelites are blown up. I mean, they are doing a phenomenal job of recruiting. But one of the reasons why it is so easy for them to recruit is because churches are not doing what they need to keep the people within the fold. There are certain things they're not addressing. We know that within the Hebrew Israelite community, there is a cultural ethnic identity that Black folks can find within that organization. In a Black church, we are quick to even say we're not a Black church. We're God's church. As if somehow saying that you're a Black church diminishes who you are in Christ. It makes it very, very difficult and complicated. And they'll address topics that we tend to avoid within the Black church. And one of those topics happens to be racism, white supremacy. Other organizations will get that. They'll deal with it in a way that is not always positive or using the right terminology or using the right words. I'm not saying they're the nicest when it comes to doing it. I don't think we should be calling anyone devils or using language along those lines. But at the same time, I think it's okay to say, hey, this is a situation and this is an issue and this needs to be addressed. And if you don't want to address it, I don't have to be in your presence just because that's what your expectation is.
And, and let me come back on that, too, because I think that, when somebody refers to a Black church or a white church, I do think it's unfortunate that, Black and white is such a divider. And I wish it could be the case that when we refer to Black churches and white churches, it wasn't a matter of separation, but just maybe a matter of, what group is predominant or what, group is, represents the demographic of that church. But unfortunately, there's more to it than that, With that being said, there's nothing wrong. And goodness knows, I struggle with this all the time with people that I deal with online. But, yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, I believe that my first identity is my identity in Christ. My identity is being made in the image of God. That's for sure. But at the same time, diversity is God's idea. You know what I'm saying? Man didn't come up with that. Diversity, Black people, white people, Asians, Hispanics, this is a mosaic of people, who ought to be able to come together under our common salvation and fellowship with one another. That's how it should be. But even with that being said, even under those circumstances, or even with that being said, we're still the diversity that He created shouldn't be something that we're actively trying to suppress. You're saying you could be in the church house. It's okay to be Black and be excited about your culture in the church house, or white or Asian or whatever else you want to be. We don't have to cleanse ourselves of all diversity in the name of Christ. That's not what we're called to do. And so what happens is when you have the church, that has this, kind of hesitance about engaging, in a healthy way that race issue, then people are going to go elsewhere. They're gonna go somewhere where they feel comfortable with being Black, and can be excited about it, and don't have to worry about offending somebody, and things of that nature. And I think it's really unfortunate that we're in a sense we're opening up the door for these groups by not dealing with these things, these racial things, in a healthy way. It's sad, but it's true, And you're right. I mean, the reality is, issues in regard to the systemic, oppression that this country has been marked with, people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. I don't know why it's so uncomfortable, but it is. And I think that if we don't talk about it, it's kind of like, again, I go back to the analogy of a parent. If I don't talk to my kids about sex, they're going to go to the playground and somebody else is going to talk to them about sex, right? So if I don't educate them on it, they're still going to encounter it. So either I want them to encounter it in a healthy way through my instruction, or I'm just going to kind of send them to the wolves and learn by it the wrong way. And that's kind of how I see it with dealing with systemic oppression. Man, I wrote an article a couple months ago about the Colin Kaepernick situation where I was explaining. I mean, daggone it. I mean, there's a reason why the man, didn't want to stand for the anthem. Now, we can agree or disagree as to whether he was justified. I mean, everybody's entitled to their opinion. That's fine. But we have to at least embrace the conversation. If you can't have those discussions in a safe environment, which the church should be, the body of Christ should be, then people are going to have those discussions elsewhere.
And the thing is, I think it should be a red flag to our white evangelical brothers to see Black Christians leave the faith and end up in one of these organizations. It should be like, hey, if they're willing to go and be involved in something like this, that should tell us how bad what we have over here is. Or should have them want to spend a little more time trying to actively engage what is taking place, not from a standpoint of solving it or trying to fix it, but just from a standpoint of saying, man, I need to be more aware of the plight of my brethren. But I think it's one of those things, man, that if I walk into a room and I see someone laying on the ground hurting, I just can't step over that person and ignore their pain. I got to ask a question. I got to say, hey, can I help? Is there something wrong? And I think that's one of the reasons why white evangelicals tend to turn a blind eye to these situations, because they realize that once I know or acknowledge that I know, now I have to do something to actually fix it based off of my faith.
That's fascinating, man. Yeah, absolutely. And there are resources within the Christian worldview that I believe should compel us to confront, not just, and again, it goes different ways, but definitely to confront racism in America today. I'm sorry, it's just, and I find myself in a difficult position because well, put it this way, I just wrote an article the other day called "Black Lives Don't Matter," and I got. You would be surprised at some of the feedback that I got from that article. Some of it was not so nice, man. And it's just like, I think people misunderstand. If I'm concerned about a particular people group, what's there to be mad about? What is there to be upset about with that? You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And I think people it's such a trigger for folks, man. It's such a trigger for folks, and it makes it difficult to navigate those conversations when you're not willing to say, you know what's going on.
Sure.
I don't have to agree with you on everything, but what's going on?
It's funny because I was having this conversation with my daughter about the same topic, about engaging people and dealing with it, and I was like, it's really strange. I gave the analogy, and I said, I don't like chocolate ice cream. And I think it's very good. I personally like butter pecan, Breyer's butter pecan. So when I go to the grocery store, to the frozen food section, there's a variety of ice cream there. But I'm going to go hit the Breyer's butter pecan. That doesn't mean I hate all ice cream. It just means that I prefer to eat butter pecan Breyers. Right. That doesn't mean that somehow I am, neglecting it, I'm looking down on it. And I said, that's what it is like oftentimes as Black Christians addressing issues within the body. That there is some notion by other people, unfortunately Black and white, who believe because you highlight the ills of one particular group that you hate the other group.
Yeah, and again, that's just not the case. And I agree. I think that's a perfect analogy. And where I look at it is, I look at it like this. I am most familiar with the conditions that African Americans face in this country. I don't know what it's like to be a middle-aged white man. I don't. I just did an interview with a guy that should be appearing within the next couple of weeks. He's a Hispanic gentleman, and he was educating me on some of the issues that they deal with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can't, you know, I'm not familiar with those types of things, but I am open to gaining understanding. You know, and as I gain understanding, I can be compassionate and empathetic towards, you know, whatever struggles different people go through. But as a default, I am most familiar with the things that I've endured. And so therefore, those are going to be kind of like the go-to as to, you know, what I speak out on. And then hopefully I can broaden my awareness over time. And I think that's what we have to be committed to doing. We have to be committed to broadening our awareness of what, you know, people who are unlike ourselves, you know, are facing. And then with the resources that are within the Christian worldview to address them, we address them. You know, because it's like the word says, bear one another's burdens. You know, I don't want to make a doctrine out of social justice necessarily, but I do think that there's scriptural precedent, you know, or scriptural justification rather, for saying, hey, you know, if this is what's going on with my brother, then I ought to be interested in how I can, you know, at very least maybe pray about it or whatever I need to do, you know, get involved in alleviating those things.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you know, so, man, you know, we went on for an hour right there, man. I don't want to hold you too long, bro. You know, this is a very, very in-depth discussion. I appreciate everything you bring to the table. Just once again, man, let people know how they can access you online, what you got out there, websites, YouTube channels, and all that kind of a thing. And we'll go at it like that.
Oh man, I'm everywhere, literally. I'm
All right.
I'm Elgin Bailey at Elgin Bailey on Twitter. I'm at BEC Media _07 on Twitter. We have a Facebook page, man, BEC Media. We have a YouTube channel where we have tons of content that you can interact with us. You can find us there. I mean, we're just about everywhere. Only place we're not, man, is Snapchat. I ain't too comfortable with Snapchat. I don't know what's going on with Snapchat.
Okay. Got you. Yeah, me neither, man. Maybe it's an age thing. I don't know what's going on with it, bro.
But man, yeah, we're everywhere, man, and just looking to not only make change, man, but be the change we're looking for.
Hey, I heard that, bro. I heard that, man. So, once again, man, I just want to thank you for coming on the show, man. I appreciate you bringing your thoughts and perspectives, and definitely was a wealth of things discussed there that I think people could chew on. So, thank you again for coming on the show, bro.
Anytime, brother. Anytime.
And for all my listeners out there, man, you know how we do. Try to bring different people, different perspectives, and love y'all, man. Peace.